Hello, and welcome back to part 6 of our workshop series on how to support neurodivergent thinkers from Western Washington University. In this session, we will discuss the topic of advocacy with an opportunity to reflect upon your role as an advocate with your neurodivergent thinker, as well as ways to support self-advocacy. So thanks again for joining us. We're going to start with some reflection questions. And if you've been with me for previous workshop sessions, these are familiar to you by now. Just a reminder to use these reflection questions to reflect in the ways that suit you best. And I'm going to go ahead and read some of these. Before I do, I want to mention that some of these reflection questions may potentially feel more applicable for family members, but friends and educators joining us for this workshop series can certainly engage in advocacy, even if it's at more of a systemic level sometimes, especially if you're an educator, when it comes to advocacy related to inclusion of neurodivergent thinkers in educational settings, for example. So just keep that in mind. So the first reflection question is, what role have I played in the past when it comes to advocacy? What was helpful or unhelpful about the role I've played historically? Second question, in what ways, if any, do I want to change how I approach advocacy at this stage in my relationship with my neurodivergent thinker or at this stage in my career as I'm advocating as an educator, let's say? And then the third question, how have I encouraged self-advocacy for neurodivergent thinkers in the past? And how can I continue to encourage self-advocacy moving forward? So I'll give you a moment to reflect upon those questions. So hopefully that was some good reflection time. I realize I probably should have shared that we have a basic definition of advocacy we're working from here, which is helping your neurodivergent thinker or thinkers get their needs met. So hopefully that was what you had in mind as you're reflecting upon these questions. So I want to say too that we will have some additional resources and ways for you to reflect on topics such as advocacy and self-advocacy through some resources we will share that will accompany these videos when they're released. So we'll have some additional resources. We've got some good ones in particular related to this topic of advocacy. So look for those to increase your reflection on this topic even further. So if you were with me for the very first session on neurodiversity, this concept will be familiar. When it comes to advocacy, we want to aim for a balanced perspective. So on the one hand, we don't necessarily want to do everything for the loved one or neurodivergent thinker or thinkers in our lives. We also don't want to say, especially if maybe they're a young adult, let's say, an emerging adult, an adult of any age. We are a little focused in this series on, thinking about college students. So there may be a temptation, especially if we're a family member who's being supportive, saying, I helped them for the first number of years of their life, but now they need to figure this out. They're on their own. What we're encouraging instead is a balanced perspective of working with your loved one to determine what specific support could continue to be helpful for them and encouraging self-advocacy for our neurodivergent thinkers when appropriate, whether it's an educational setting, a workplace setting, etc. So one thing I do want to make sure to validate, though, is that if we are maybe in that place of wanting to continue to do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the neurodivergent thinkers in our lives, I think that is an understandable tendency. because our systems are not necessarily naturally understanding or accommodating of neurodivergent folks, as we've talked about when we've explored topics such as ableism. Certain challenges as well for neurodivergent thinkers, like related to executive function and motivation, let's say, might also make it a little bit harder sometimes for the neurodivergent thinkers in our lives to advocate for themselves in ways we maybe see would be helpful. I do want to say, though, that ultimately it is the choice of the neurodivergent thinker in our lives to advocate for themselves or not, to reach out for accommodations or not. And we may need to do some work around accepting that fact. So we've talked about acceptance earlier in this workshop series. Easier said than done, but that's one thing I also wanted to note. So want to say on the left-hand side, we have a lovely little description of how advocacy is absolutely necessary because it's not necessarily filled with systems built for neurodivergent folks. So on the right-hand side, we do have some examples of accommodations, specifically at the college level. Again, brought to you by Western Washington University. So we have a little bit of a focus here on college-age students receiving accommodations. So there's some examples there, including meeting with disability services, building in sensory or detox time, advocating for a single occupancy residence can be really helpful sometimes for some neurodivergent thinkers. Body doubling is something we've talked about previously, connecting with a counseling center or a prescriber in order to get medications, and potentially working with something like an executive functioning coach. So we'll talk about that a little further in a future session. So I wanted to share here a really lovely example of how advocacy for oneself can look in action for a neurodivergent thinker. So this again is from our friends at understood.org. And what's really cool about the subject of this video, Savannah, is she is currently a mental health therapist. So this was filmed a few years ago when Savannah was in college, but she's doing really well, which I just think is very exciting. And so you'll see some really lovely examples in this video of how Savannah was able to advocate for herself in a college setting. So enjoy.
My name is Savannah Trevino Casillas. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a sophomore at Arizona State University, and I have dyscalculia. I never really grasped any of the math concepts. Even like adding and subtracting were always really difficult for me.
I didn't initially know how serious her disability was. I started noticing challenges. If we'd go out and buy ice cream and I'd have her pay and she didn't want to pay. But I thought that's all it was math challenges.
The things that dyscalculia made difficult would be like adding, subtracting, multiplication, division, depth perception, so gauging like how far something is or how close an object is. Also time management, counting change or like making change when it comes to dealing with money. And then directions, so like having an idea of where you're going. My mom was always a really big support system for me in my education. Since she was a special educator herself, she was the one who wanted me to get tested for special education services. After she passed away and my grandma took on the role as that support system, she was really engaged in learning what I struggle with and learning how to help me best.
Before, I was fun grandma. I was grandma to go shopping with and go out to eat with and spend holidays with. After her mom died, the challenges became much more pronounced.
I didn't really want to be labeled as having a learning disability, and I kind of rejected help at first, and it wasn't until high school where I really started opening up about getting help and embracing my learning disability.
She learned self-advocacy skills in high school. She has an awareness of what her needs are. She knew the accommodations that she needed to be successful.
Once you graduate high school, your accommodations or the help doesn't stop there, it continues at the university level. I knew I wanted to stay in-state, and ASU is one of the closest universities to my home, and their Disability Resource Center was like one of the best ones in all the universities in Arizona. The Disability Resource Center provides me with my accommodations and my classes. It's a place where I've really found kind of like a second home, and where I always kind of have like my base on campus, and I've made a lot of friends there. The resources that I utilize at the DRC are my accommodations, my testing accommodations, which include double time on testing in the DRC testing center, and having a note taker in my classes who will just go in and take notes for me, and they'll share those notes with me in case I miss something. I'm allowed to record in classes.
I haven't met many people that have that stick-to-itiveness. She really knows what she wants. She's got very specific goals.
She's that dedicated, she's that committed, she's that willing, she's that driven to succeed in life.
The resources at a college or a university are one of the biggest factors that any student should look into, especially if they have a learning disability or some sort of challenge. I really love college. College so far has been an incredible and an amazing experience. I have taken some really challenging classes, and I've taken a lot of fun classes, and I've met a lot of people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and I am just excited to see where it takes me even further.
I just love that video for so many reasons. I think it is really important that we're able in this workshop series to highlight a lot of different aspects of neurodiversity. So I'm glad we were able to include a learning difference like dyscalculia in that story. I also just really appreciate how Savannah was honest about the fact that at first she didn't really want to be labeled as having a disability or a learning difference. And so it did take a while to become that incredible self-advocate that we were able to see at the end of that video. I'd be remiss if I didn't note that here at Western, we have our Disability Access Center, which is fabulous, does a lot of the same things that the university in Arizona was able to aid Savannah with. One thing I really appreciate too about our Disability Access Center at Western is that you don't have to have a formal diagnosis, let's say, of ADHD or autism in order to go in and brainstorm some accommodations that would be helpful for you. So if you suspect there's some neurodiversity going on in any area, you can still do some self-advocacy with the help of the Disability Access Center to get your needs met and get some accommodations going, because we recognize that it can really be a barrier for a lot of people to get a formal diagnosis, which is unfortunate, but true. And so I really appreciate that about our disability access services here at Western. All right, so want to give you a quick summary of the last 3 workshops we've enjoyed together. So first, we talked back in session 4 about activities of daily living and how they can be a form of self-care, but they can also be challenging for a variety of reasons. So we've really talked a lot about spoon theory, recognizing the role of spoons to be encouraging, to be curious, and how body doubling can be really helpful for the neurodivergent thinker in your life. Also talked about how play and enjoying life and relationships are important for self-care, preventing burnout, and replenishing spoons. And I did want to take a second here to just emphasize that at times being a supporter for a neurodivergent thinker and caregiver stress specifically can also be challenging. And maintaining self-care, whether it's on your own or with your neurodivergent thinker in your life, is really important. So burnout prevention is important for us as well as supporters, regardless of our neurotype. So I wanted to briefly mention that. And finally, strike a balance between supporting your loved one by advocating with them as needed while also promoting self-advocacy. So our next sessions, which I hope you join me for, our final sessions in this series, will explore the topics of executive functioning, emotions, and sensory processing. So thanks for tuning in, and be well, WWU.